What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. It really is amazing to see all these different games that are being offered right now. There's the dark and dirty and gritty games that do their damnedest to remind you that you live in the world's largest sewer and everyone above you is just going to crap on you all day. And sure, Vampire is a blast. But then you have others, saccharine affairs, where somehow the devs found a way to find another 2 million colors of the rainbow, like a digital sack of Skittles, and ejected them out into their title. And that, my friends, is Onrush. It's an over-the-top single-player, large multiplayer game with 12 tracks, 4 different seasons that affect gameplay, as well as some unique takes on gameplay modes. It's by Codemasters and Deep Silver, and it's out right now for $59.99. Also, thanks to the devs for supplying the code early. It always helps to get the reviews done. Let's see if by removing the finish line from racing games, flooding it with tons of AI, and then lighting almost everything on fire is a good idea, or if it's highway to the danger zone. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Onrush. Lots and lots of bots, yo dog, we heard you like snow, and the mastery of elastic racetrack design. Graphics are up first. Seriously, the game is gorgeous. It's pretty much what a world would look like if you snorted Tart-Tinies laced with LSD and cocaine, then watched ESPN Racing for 11 hours straight. It's hard not to notice the first time you have like 14 people on screen and then you pull off a backflip, landing on your opponent's car, and it splits and slows down into slow motion like Burnout Paradise for a second, and shows you them flying into the ether as you jet off in a trail of fire. And those are the boring parts. If Onrush is anything, it's graphically rich, with an incredible eye towards explosions, particle effects, and color use. Seriously, the first time you smash through another vehicle, it's like living inside a particle collider as every part tries to get away from every other part of the destroyed vehicle as quickly as it possibly can, sending shocks, forks, people, and fenders flying in separate directions. Let's talk about track design for a second. It's instantly noticeable how excellent this is, from the down-the-funnel moments of industrial-based tracks leading through the decrepit ruins of old power stations with punk rock graffiti slathered all over the sides, to sunshiny beaches that have you crashing through the ass end of an ocean vessel that's been buried up to its nautical nuts in sand. Also, prior to release, the developers had stated that they were working on various ways to have a subtle effect so that people could understand where to drive on the tracks. And this is one of the things you'll notice is it steers you mentally with little graphical elements towards a small gap coming up in front of you as you jet out of some steam pipes and then send some other racer to his high-speed hotel in the sky, and then you fly off a 600-foot jump. It's heady stuff, and it's done remarkably well to really inform the gamer of where they need to go. A good racing game really needs to detail and define the driving lines for the racer, especially when it's open-ended like this, and I have to say, Onrush does a really good job here. Now, of course, this might all sound over the top, and it actually is. Everything in the game is, from the design of the Road Warriors meets 1980s fashion of the characters, to the cars, the trucks, and the motorbikes, all of course having a huge number of variations themselves that can go from looking like stretched out Volkswagen Bugs with random items welded all over to them, to awesome looking futuristic motorbikes hot off some crazy time travel machine. For me, graphics in a game have to tie together, and to be honest, I didn't think Onrush's would, but somehow with smart color use and some shared design philosophies across level and vehicles, Onrush came out the other side of that worry pretty much unscathed. But of course, if you just look awesome but can't perform, you're the ultimate warrior of video games. And when it comes to performance-wise, I have to say, this game is not that. When it comes to FPS, the original Xbox still doesn't have a 60 FPS mode, or at least it hasn't been patched in, while the PS4, PS4 Pro, and Xbox X all do, with the Xbox X and the PS4 Pro allowing for a switch between 4K at 30 and 1080p at 60 FPS. Depending on what you want, you'll be able to choose between those, but I would suggest the 60 FPS version, just to, of course, allow you for a little bit quicker response time. Because unlike games like Drive Club or Forza and others that usually go for a more defined and almost clinical look, Onrush works firmly tongue-in-cheek the entire time and somehow also looks good enough to at least be mentioned with those titles when it comes to games that can wow you on first glance. Honestly, graphically, the game really does look amazing. Sound, music, and voice.
Perfect. Nice.
And you know what? Let's do music first. This is not for me. I'm not sure what the shift is here. Maybe it's the move towards more aggressive themes than maybe some of the team's past games, but it has me coming out of this with a bit of a mixed bag in my reaction. It's harsher and obviously aimed at reflecting the craziness of the environments, but most of the tracks just didn't feel fluid or catchy at all. Also, when you merge the music that has rampaging beats like this, and then the game cuts or moves the music around to make some special crash or move more noticeable to you, it can be incredibly brash, and it can leave a song that's already a bit disjointed feeling almost broken. I certainly do see what they were aiming for here, and you see other games do this, whether with licensed or original music, but it didn't really hit for me. Sound. I wasn't impressed at all, honestly, with the audio channeling, just overall surround. Testing it with various different systems and on various different audio setups, it feels like at most times the game treats right and left a bit more like over here and over there. It works, it still informs the gamer of where an enemy may be, but it certainly feels a little bit loose in how it defines where everybody is on the track. Now, that being said, there's a ton of exploding, already exploded, and getting ready to exploding stuff in Onrush, and I think overall it is still pretty good, but I would have loved to have seen some of that tightened up just a bit. Voice. Yeah, so I think we all have that friend who, when you get into a group, they wait for the quietest time to say something that not only makes no damn sense, but makes the entire event feel like a let's wait for something funny to happen so we can ignore that moment simulator. That's the voices in the game. Sure, the announcer tells you what race type you're going into is fine. It's a generic Miss Genericton trying to sound like you've entered some worldwide extraordinary racing club. But when you're racing and you crash or specific things happen to you, they're like one-off blurbs that don't even sound like they belong in the same game. It'd be like someone getting a huge hit in a football game and the announcer saying, "My lord, cars drive fast, Bob." Many times you're sitting there thinking, what the fuck did he just say, and what does that have to do with what's going on? It's obviously supposed to be an eclectic, reactionary comment, but it never ever works. And as always, that brings us to the meat, which is the gameplay and a bit about the story. Now, you play as pretty much yourself, joining a high-octane, over-the-top racing club around the world. Think what would happen if Travis Pastrana had an unlimited budget, cloned himself, and then removed that one last iota of good decision from his brain before doing so. That's pretty much the game. Once you jump in, you do find out, though, that Onrush has some very unique elements. The first is the fact that it's a team-based racer. That's right, team. In many modes, you'll be driving with others and using your special skills or just sheer talent to perform specific things on the racetrack, because in almost all ways, no tracks in Onrush have a finish line. They're generalized large tracks that, while driving down, you fill the requirements of whatever mode you're in. It's very demolition derby at times, but with some kind of overall objective. Also, built into the cycle of the game is destroying enemies to get boost, but the game floods the levels with AI. By smashing them, you gain that boost, and then you gain enough boost, you can also power up a rush move, which basically turns you into an Elon Musk rocket for a couple seconds. Also, performing special moves depending on the car will build boost. For example, one vehicle may have you gain boost from driving right next to enemies. The other might give you a little extra boost for doing barrel rolls off of jumps. Of course, while doing all this, you have specific objectives for the different modes, like Lockdown, where a moving waypoint is on the track and you're trying to basically capture it and speeding along. And this waypoint's constantly moving and shifting in front of you, and you and your teammates have to stay in its center for a particular amount of time. Now, this is where having yourself teamed up with, let's say, a fast motorbike that can weave in between the trees that the waypoint's decided to traipse through, also with a massive truck that can block incoming racers with, works so well. Unfortunately, there's some issues I'll talk about in a second. You also have Countdown, which is one of my favorites. As the time counts down, you have to drive through slalom gates to add very small increments of time to your side. And if the game design is anything, it's varied, as those gates can be all over the track as you're moving forward. This really does elicit this incredibly frantic gameplay where you feel like you could almost hit one spot to add a second or two to your countdown, but you decide to take out the enemy right next to you instead and hope the next set of gates is closer rather than farther away from you. I really do love that split section reaction requirement in that mode in particular. Now, Switch is another interesting mode where each time you crash, you have to choose another vehicle to play, so you have to sort of adjust as you play along. All of these can be played online, but the game does have a very robust single-player mode that can be played offline, even not plugged in, that removes a couple features, but you can still enjoy the game overall. You can also make your own custom matches by adjusting things like the mode, the difficulty, the weather, and various other elements that feed back into all those objectives. Of course, without good control, a game like this isn't going to be playable anyway, but I honestly think they did a spectacular job. You have to really understand how to handle the control in a game where 1 second you're jumping off the back of a freight train and then next flinging your body indoor speed biker fast through some trees. Onrush throughout the entire game, I almost always felt like I was in control. I say almost because it wasn't all the time. You see, the game has some crash cams, and sometimes when you take someone out, it likes to give you this cool shot of them exploding and flying off. The only issue is the game also continues to run in the background and still track collisions, resulting in many moments where you watch this amazing crash cam only to watch a second later as you are in a crash cam by smashing into some rocks. Of course, a couple quibbles aside, you might think, man, this all sounds amazing, but Onrush crashes and burns in some places. First, the multiplayer mode. It really requires a shit ton of people to be playing. It requires some odd waits for the lobbies already, as well as the worry that in the future these modes really aren't going to have the support they need. Additionally, the single player gets stunningly boring very fast. Sure, you can unlock tons of new vehicles and equipment for you to make and put on your character, but without true racing of any kind, the game sort of starts to fall apart. And I think a lot of that can be based around the AI. Now, other team racers are going to be colorized, and the enemy's team will be colorized, but the game floods the area with local AI. These are shaded black and white for easy identification, so you know you can smash into them and boost quite quickly. And that causes this very odd feeling to a game. This could have been one of those over-the-top games where every single enemy was colorized and they all did play the same, where it just looks like this massive stampede of racers going forward. Instead, you get this really odd dichotomy of characters sort of flitting in like they just popped out of the Matrix, you smashing into them to get boost, and then actually defeating the real enemies in the game. For a game based around destruction like this, it would have really behooved them to have them all look the same. I know a lot of people are going to ask about the cosmetics. They are both buyable with in-game money, as well as sometimes getting them in the loot boxes at the end of races or when you go up a level. Money's earned by both winning whatever race you're in, but also performing special daily bounties. None of this is real cash, so you have sort of a loot box mixed with purchase system. I like it. It's probably one of the better ways to go if you don't want to spend your money on something super expensive. You might get an epic or a rare item that you can track and still buy if you had wanted to. So it allows for people who don't mind loot boxes to go ahead and just see what they win when they go up a level. And also, of course, those people who want to save their money, get something big, you can do that as well. Overall, I'd say this. Onrush is a great arcade experience, but it is hampered by some fairly poor planning, it feels like. Its reliance on the lack of real race modes, plus making the AI look and act differently than the normal teams in the game, instantly locks you into this odd dichotomy. Also, the game being team-based sounds great, but entire races would go by where I would win even on the harder difficulty and yet have no real clue if I ever did anything to help my team. It's a strange focus that doesn't always actually get reflected in the finishes many times. There's something excellent here for sure, but I think it's held back by a couple fundamental problems. Fun factor. You know, there are a few things as enjoyable as watching an enemy split into separate parts in front of you because you turned into the first Chevy-based rocket in history and just blew them apart. But it fell off rather quickly. It doesn't take very long to see all the races. It doesn't take very long to have played all the modes. There aren't a ton of them. And with no actual finish lines, that feeling of reward by getting better in the game isn't always actually reflected. And in fact, sometimes you'll win and sort of wonder what exactly occurred throughout the entire race. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale on PC. This is definitely a wait for a sale. There is some cool arcade action here for sure, but for full price, not quite sure that I can recommend that. There's something fun, but more in that arcade style, and the oddities that it offers never truly faded from my memory. There was always something a little bit missing or something a little bit off. That's obviously due to the restricted modes, the way they put them together, the way the AI works, and the requirements for the multiplayer, which I think for a lot of people are going to cause issues even right off the bat. Once again, we are done. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. You can follow me on Twitter, you can join up on our Reddit, or you can become a patron on the Patreon website, which always helps me continue to give you guys these reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your week.